Following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah, go Cowboys! This is the Cowboys Nation podcast with instant reactions and analysis to breaking news and events in Cowboys Nation.
1,834 days after it began, the Mike McCarthy era has come to a close in Dallas. Breaking news brought to you by the Dallas Cowboys media team with Patrick Nosey Walker, Nick Eatman, Tommy Yarish. I'm Kyle Yeomans. As Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys front office have agreed to part ways following the conclusion of his 5-year contract that is coming to an end on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Gentlemen, there's a lot to unpack here. We've got about 30 minutes, commercial free, but this is the emergency podcast, and the Avengers, the bat symbol, has now been thrown out into the atmosphere to talk about what just happened. Nick, I'll let you start as kind of the content manager here. When did this first come down, and what led to this decision?
Losing to the 49ers twice, and then losing to Green Bay. Like that's where it started. I mean, obviously, because I think everybody knows that McCarthy was brought here to take this franchise that Jason Garrett had the keys to for almost a decade, and to take it to another level. And I think he did in certain ways you can look at it. But I think not winning in the playoff is kind of what led to it. And then this season, as tough as it was, it's still there was just too many times where they didn't look organized, they didn't look prepared at times, and the end result they didn't have success. And we saw trouble before the injuries, so that was part of it too. But I think the lack of playoff success was really the reason.
1-3 in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in his 5 seasons here, he became one of the winningest head coaches in franchise history, which is true. But those were regular season wins. Like you said, Kyle, and like you brought up, Nick, the postseason success just wasn't there. He wasn't able to exercise some of the demons like San Francisco. And then, and I said this many times, it just felt like the Green Bay Packers game in January broke this team, because they were never the same, especially at AT&T Stadium in the games that followed that in the the corresponding season. So, credit to both Mikes, Zimmer and McCarthy, for keeping the fight in this locker room over the back end of the season. We saw what happened with San Francisco and Miami and some of the other locker rooms fracturing when things were down. He kept the fight going, but at the end of the day, there was just too much. And like you said, Nick, well put, the injuries certainly helped torpedo the season, but things were not great before those injuries started to kind of rain down. So here we are.
Was it the injuries, or did the things really go downhill when Tommy got here? I mean, one of the two.
There's a correlation to be spoken on.
All right.
Sorry.
No, well, aside from
Since he was born, really,
aside from, aside from
Damn.
jeez,
That's fair.
I mean, I haven't even got a chance to give my 2 cents yet, and it's already on my
Give your
fault.
2 cents.
No, I think these guys make great points. Aside from my hiring, I mean, when you look at the last 3 years going 12-5, that's all great. But I think that it's been clear, and this makes it especially clear, that the standard here is to win games in the playoffs. And unfortunately for Mike McCarthy, he didn't do that during his time in Dallas. So if that's what Jerry Jones, this front office, is looking for, then this decision makes sense. 7-10 this season. You could talk about injuries, but like you said, at the start of the year, this did not look like a very well-coached team. And there's penalties have been an issue all year. Discipline's been an issue all year. You think about the game against the Bengals, where you just got to get out of the way if you're Amani Oruwariye. It's just little details like that, but those little details start to add up as the season goes along. And that's why you see a 7-10 finish, and ultimately I think that's one of the reasons why you see the Joneses and Mike McCarthy not being able to strike a deal here.
Well, and I think this is a microcosm of the downfalls of the last 5 years, right? When you're the head coach of a football team and you're expected to elevate them to postseason success, to taking a team to an NFC Championship game, to a Super Bowl, and getting back to that point where they haven't been in so very long, it doesn't all fall on you from an X's and O's standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, from a roster building standpoint. But you will be the one held accountable, win or lose. It's just plain and simple how it works in the NFL.
Right.
And I think that's where Mike McCarthy had his success and his downfalls. He did a lot with this team, and we've talked about it on Talking Cowboys too. Did a lot with this team and the injuries late in the season, but completely understand Baltimore. New Orleans, some of those downfalls early in the season where you're supposed to match up or surpass those teams on paper, and you don't necessarily do that, and now that's where this decision comes down to an end.
I think this has to be pointed out, though, because this definitely feels like the first 5 minutes of this show feels like Cowboys moving on from Mike McCarthy, which is what's happened. But let's also
there's a second side to it.
Yeah, like this could be really a free agent type thing where I think he wanted him back. I mean, I think if for the right price, because you wouldn't deny the Bears to talk to him if you didn't want to negotiate your way.
At least at some level.
But when you look at the agent that he has, which is, I think McCarthy's agent's the same agent as Harbaugh and Peyton, and they're making a lot more than $10 million. They're making more like $12, $15 million a year. Then I think that's what they're looking at and say, hey, I've won a Super Bowl just like these guys, and or national championship or whatever. I've won a Super Bowl, and I think that's a big part of it. So I think he left on his own terms, but I think Jerry. Somebody told me this. I think it was a great line. I think Jerry made him an offer he could refuse.
I think that,
and that's probably what happened.
There's an element to that.
I think that happened because we mentioned talking Cowboys. We've said this, and I've said this as recently as last week when I said this is free agency is a two-way street, and this is not a Garrett situation wherein the exit of Garrett, there weren't teams calling trying to get interest and interviews with Garrett. McCarthy, even though this was a down season for him with the Cowboys 7-10, he still has leverage in that there are other teams like the Chicago Bears, and I believe eventually here will come the New Orleans Saints knocking on his door. He has interest.
Raiders maybe.
Exactly. Now, that being said, you posed a great question not so long ago on the same panel, and you said if we as individuals wanted to keep McCarthy, what would that contract look like? And I jumped out there and I said, hey, based on the strong finish to the back end of the season, I would be willing to bring him back, but what did I say? 2 years. And I said my offer will be 2 years, but he probably will not take my 2-year offer. I think that's really what it boiled down to. I think that Jerry did want him back. Jerry put an offer out there. Maybe Mike wanted $5 million with a certain salary. Yeah. Jerry probably wanted 2 or 3 as kind of like a mulligan with a team out after the first year or so. And the money wasn't there, and Mike respectfully shook his hand and said, you know what, I'm going to see what else is out there.
I want to read the statement from Jerry Jones regarding the decision on Mike McCarthy that they have put out there. Yeah, I'll blow through this real quick. Throughout Mike McCarthy's tenure here, including the last several weeks, I've been very complimentary of the job that he has done. He has applied to our record over that time period, our team unity and culture, Mike's qualifications and track record of success, and on a personal level as a tremendous human being, said owner, president, general manager Jerry Jones. I have a great respect for Mike, and he has led the team through some very unique and challenging times during his tenure, very much so. Over the past week, Mike and I had the opportunity to conduct a joint review of all aspects of the past season, our players and our staff, and have spent considerable time discussing the road forward for the team. These discussions were thorough and received an appropriate amount of time and depth to cover. Prior to reaching the point of contract negotiations, though, it became mutually clear that it would be better for each of us to head in a different direction. I thank Mike and wish him, his wife Jessica, and their family the best. They have been a wonderful part of our community here. We will commence a search process immediately to hire the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, end quote.
Your key line right there is prior to reaching the point of contract negotiations, though, it became mutually clear that it would be better for each of us to head in a different direction. So that tells me all I need to know about. You were talking about leverage. You were talking about this being part of McCarthy, not necessarily wanting to agree to terms. So that's your story.
Well, and I don't think any of us here, nor would Jerry in the front office say it all together and encompassing to say that Mike McCarthy was given a fair shot in 2024.
Absolutely.
I don't think that can be said. The injuries are one thing, but the roster and the lack of salary cap and the lack of talent that they added throughout the offseason, he absolutely confessed. He said unique challenges, and this is all a part of it. The all-in from last year, I know everybody's sick of hearing that term, but it puts an unnecessary amount of pressure on the coaching staff. So it's not out of the question for Mike McCarthy to say, hey, New Orleans is calling, Chicago is calling, Las Vegas is open, there are other openings across the way. Why not have at least a look outside of this building? If McCarthy's unsure and Jerry Jones is unsure, because he's talked about it before too. Jerry has said on numerous occasions, you don't know the check I would write in order to ensure the best chance at winning a Super Bowl outside of the salary cap restrictions that they're given. Head coaches don't count toward your salary cap. Correct. You can write whatever check you want, he hasn't done that for Mike McCarthy. That tells me he wasn't completely sold on Mike McCarthy
He wasn't
or anyone.
all in on McCarthy. Is
Correct.
What you're saying?
And if that's the case, maybe it was the decision. They looked across the table, looked inward, and said, "This isn't best for me as Mike McCarthy. It isn't best for you as Jerry Jones. Maybe this is the time that we just walk our different ways." And it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think there's other factors involved here. Because there's a lot of. I mean, every coach is a free agent now. It does start at the top.
Yeah.
But you also have you have your director of or vice president of I almost said security.
Player personnel.
Same. Yeah, player security.
Oh, he secures a lot of things.
Right. But as far as the draft and everything that, with scouting and Will McClay. And so I think that there's a part of it too where you're just trying to figure out where you're going next year. What are they doing? What's the next? What are the top priorities? And I definitely think they're going to try to keep Will McClay in here as well. Now his contract expires at the end of the draft, but I'm sure there's some teams, some GM jobs that are.
It's the first week in May. It's the week after the draft concludes.
But if a team wants to make him the GM, he could leave right now if he wanted to. So I think there's just a lot of factors involved here, more than just is McCarthy good enough to come back or does he want to come back? There's a lot going on.
And I
Your
will
quarterback to that relationship.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of different things.
ton. And I will say this to the Will McClay point is that, and Nick, you and I, and Tommy and I, Cal and I, we've all had this conversation, and we are in agreement that Will McClay is the single most valuable free agent in this organization right now.
Right.
That being said, one of the ways I would entice Will McClay to stick around before his contract expires is I would say, hey, you get to have a hand in who the next head coach is going to be. So 100% let him into that process. Bring him into it, and you could not only retain Will McClay, but now you have a more cohesiveness. And it's something that you brought up, Tommy, a few episodes ago in Talking Cowboys. We talked about alignment. Okay, so if you want to get closer to that singularity and that alignment, you bring Will McClay into that fold and ask him to help with the hiring process as well.
It wouldn't even really be a help. It would be a significant portion of the hiring process.
And an important part of that alignment that you mentioned is alignment on your roster, too. This roster and the decisions that, whether it be Will McClay or whoever it will be, and whoever this coaching staff coming in is going to have to be on alignment on the type of guys and type of players that they want on their roster. We leave at the Senior Bowl in 2 weeks, so that's going to be your first big event
tick.
But that's what I'm saying is these decisions need to happen somewhat quickly. I mean,
I hope the head coach goes if he's hired.
Yeah,
needs to.
I would
has to be.
We say that McCarthy had zero interest
in the Senior Bowl, even year one, right?
Yeah. And he said it's because of the changes that they've made, and the coaches can't really be on the field and all that stuff. But they
get a suite. Yeah. There's
a
lot there.
Different now. Yeah, you're right. It's moved to a different location. But
yeah.
I don't know if I cut you off. Were you done?
Well, I was just saying, but that's the first marker of an event of hey, you got, especially with this team, when you don't know what free agency is going to look like for them, you don't know who they're going to re-sign and how limited they're going to be in the salary cap. If this is a team that's going to build through the draft, that becomes increasingly more important. And events like the Senior Bowl and the Combine become increasingly more important. So some stuff's got to get figured out so you can go in with an idea of, hey, what are we looking for? What are our positions of need, and how do we move forward in the new scheme?
Yeah, I was going to point out this, and I've used this analogy on my show before, but, there's been a lot of talk from Dak and CD, and players said, Micah, they said the right things about their support for McCarthy. And the players, he's always been a player's coach. But I say this, and this will take you back to your days in school, and Tommy, a few weeks ago, but literally. But everyone loved the sub, right? When the sub came in, you're like
the substitute teacher.
Everyone loved the substitute. You're like, okay, why? Because he's easy. Because he or she, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be easy, and it's all good. Paper airplanes flying across and all that stuff. Well, everyone loves Mike. Well, of course.
Turns on a movie.
You ever been on there? You ever been over on Friday? I mean, like, they don't practice like other teams. I'm sorry, I'll just say it. They don't practice like other teams do.
No.
Other teams practice on Fridays. They don't. He takes them off their feet, off their leg, and he's taking care of them, which is great. Mm-hmm. Certainly didn't help from the injury front, but still. But my point is that the players love him, because he does a good job of taking care of them. But sometimes, they didn't like Jimmy Johnson early on.
Yeah.
The Giants, they didn't like Parcells because He was an ass to them. Was he a good coach? Yes. So there's got to be that balance. And I'm saying, while everyone loves having McCarthy here, the players, at least that's what they said, it's okay not to like your head coach because he's doing his job to get you ready to play. And so that's where I think it's okay for them to say, well, maybe the next coach doesn't have to be the most well-liked person in the world.
Well, think about it from a Mike Zimmer standpoint, right? We just recently heard Mike Zimmer say that he regrets not being his normally heavy-handed self.
That's what we anticipated coming in.
We anticipated he would come in and he would be the bulldog that he normally is. And he said that he softened his approach for several reasons. One, they were a successful defense. He didn't want to uproot that. But there were other things that he chose to come in a little bit more softly. Yeah. And it was the back end of the season where he became that hard-nosed guy. Don't you do it. He became that hard-nosed head coach, which was like the old ball coach. He became the Steve Spurrier type thing. And that coincided with the defense turning around. And after the season, you go back and you ask Mike Zimmer, what did he say? He was like, I regret that I didn't start out that way. Yeah.
Well, because he met his defensive end like that morning, like, hey, how you doing? Oh, up from the practice squad. Okay, go rush up quarterback. I mean, like every week it was somebody like that. So you're not going to yell at somebody you just met.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of that going on too.
There was a lot of that going on. I think that brings up the point, though, like you said, does that show us a roadmap as to who the next head coach could be? Because we're halfway through this emergency podcast, and we've talked a lot about McCarthy and the way he's gone out the door, whether it's by his decision or the coaches or the front office's decision. Now, the plain and simple matter is there will be a new head coach.
Coming to America line. Mm-hmm. Who's next?
Who's next? Who's going to take over? I mean, if you look at it from the outside looking in, this is a team with a franchise quarterback. Check. You've got that. You've got all pros in every level of your offense and your defense. So you have top 1 through 8 on your roster. You feel really good. Maybe 1 through 10. You got a great kicker. You got a great return man. You got a couple different free agents along the way that you've got to kind of make sure. But the 11 through 53 on this roster is not necessarily anything to write home about.
Agreed.
Neither is the salary cap situation. And the fact it could be a good thing or a bad thing. You've got to hire an entire staff to figure it out with a question mark around your de facto player personnel leader in Will McClay's contract coming up too. This isn't an easy opening, even though it does have some pros and it does have some cons. Where do you look? Where do you start?
Well, I think the fact that you've got your 3 arguably most important positions checked off. You've got an all-pro quarterback, you got an all-pro wide receiver, and an all-pro pass rusher.
Oh, yeah.
That is going to be attractive to any coach at any level of football.
They're under contract.
And they are
want to
under
get
contract.
Might want to get Micah done.
Mike, I have a good feeling about
Mike. He had a pissed-off pass rusher who didn't make all-pro.
There you go. So, but they're all-pro caliber players, right? I think that's...
No doubt about it.
Absolutely. So... You combine that, but you make a good point about 11 through 53 being, where this team needs to make up for it. And that's why this draft is so important. And that's why free agency, ultimately, I don't think the Cowboys' approach from last season is going to work this time around. If you want to be a Super Bowl contending team, you've got to get players. I'm not saying you have to break the bank and throw $50 million at 3 different guys.
Got to play.
But you've got to find guys that can fill in certain roles. You don't need all pros at all 22 positions.
No.
And not every Super Bowl team has had that. You just need guys who fit your scheme, who fit what you're trying to do, and find guys who can surround Micah Parsons and play well. I mean, look at what Carl Lawson did this year to resurge his career. You can look at some cornerbacks that you can try to add to this roster because you went through, 7 or 8 different starters this season? Yeah. So that's the most important part to me, regardless of who comes into this organization. But I do think that those 3 cornerstones, and Dak, CD, and Micah, are going to be attractive for head coaches.
And not to be forgotten, you also have 2 all-pro cornerbacks.
Right.
We'll see when Trayvon can come back, but you got Deron Bland, new injury notwithstanding, because this one came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You have several cornerstone pieces. So agreed, 11 through 53 doesn't look great. That being said, if I'm a potential incoming head coach candidate, this actually looks very attractive for me because some of the other vacancies that are out there don't have any of those cornerstone pieces, let alone several.
Yeah, you got like a quarterback here, a wide receiver there.
That's one.
Kind of it.
Right, that's one.
Agent
also,
running back in New Orleans.
The fact that every assistant and position coach is on an expiring contract, I get to sit back and say, okay, I get to bring in my entire team, my entire unit. That's what Mike McCarthy mostly did, right? So
it didn't work well on the defense.
Right, but to his credit, Nolan was out of here in 1 year.
Yeah.
But the overarching point is if you're a head coach and you're looking at this Dallas situation, you're saying, okay, when I come in, I know for a fact that I get carte blanche over saying who my assistants are because this guy's not on the contract. So he's left over from the previous regime. No, he's not, nor is he, nor is he, nor is he. So I get that as a positive. Plus, I get my cornerstone pieces. The rest is just where are you with the salary cap? And I continue to contend, anyone who follows me knows, I continue to contend that they're not as bad with the salary cap in 2025 as you're being sold, but that's a conversation for a different podcast. It's an attractive job. The main question is, can you handle, and shouts out to the documentary to what we do here, can you handle the weight of the star? Mm-hmm. Can you come into this organization and handle an understanding that, above all, that logo weighs a lot more than the Chicago Bears logo, the Jacksonville Jaguars logo, even the New Orleans Saints logo. So, and there are some candidates who can, like a Pete Carroll, for example, or a Sean McVay, if you were willing to trade for a Sean McVay. There are some candidates out there who know what it feels like and who have performed at a high level under the brightest of lights.
There's also a lot of uncertainty
and
in the other candidates, too. That's what makes this intriguing is there are names out there.
There are.
Like that. You're actually going to have an article online later, right?
Coming today after we're done with this emergency podcast. 20 candidates that the Cowboys will likely be interested in.
I want to hear some, Nick.
Any of them former Cowboy players?
One.
Only one? I'm kind of shocked by that.
Are you sure?
Hold on.
There's definitely two that I'm thinking.
There's more than one.
All right.
There's one that's an OC in Philadelphia. There's another one that's a DC.
HC, but he's
and there's one
HC.
Got a huge banner up here.
Yeah, so there are a couple, but there are 20
There's
names.
a DC in Detroit too.
There
that's
is
3.
Right.
Yeah.
3.
Right. So
There's 3 there.
So Aaron Glenn, Jason Witten,
Kellen Moore.
I forgot about Aaron Glenn.
So, and this is
that would be my if I had the decision and I had the interview, that would be where I start.
Well, an important note for Glenn, and I know Ben Johnson will probably be another name that's thrown around there a lot. If the Cowboys wanted to interview them, they'd have to wait until after the Lions season is over now.
Because they didn't take advantage.
Which would be after the Senior Bowl,
Correct.
and then that just won't work because they need to go to Mobile, right?
Correct.
Ideally. So 20 names I'll be dropping after the podcast. And it's a mix. It's a mix of experienced guys like Pete Carroll and Sean McVay and what it would take to get a Sean McVay. And some names that people might cringe at, a John Gruden, or maybe you're not in on Ron Rivera. But these are proven guys that they're going to be interested in. And then you have
Rex Ryan on there?
No. He might end up with the Jets again. But then you have, coordinators like Kellen Moore with no head coaching experience. You have, obviously, we talked about Aaron Glenn. Ben Johnson is going to be on this list. And you talk about some of the less experienced ones who are coming from the collegiate level who might have some interest in trying to interview with the Cowboys, like Lane Kiffin or... Say it.
Steve
Sarkisian.
Wow, you made him say it?
I made him say it.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's going to be a robust list, a lot of interesting candidates. And we don't know what direction Jerry's going to go in because his archetype is to go with the proven guy.
Okay.
But
let's start there then.
But
yeah,
does he break rank this time?
Could. But if you were to look at the list and put most likely up there, would there be more of the breaking rank and going with the younger, unproven coordinators, Nick, or would it be more so the experienced and proven head coaches?
More so that.
Yeah, the second one. So where would you
I put 2 O's in that, Moore. That's where I think Kellen Moore, I think, is the one that makes the most sense for Jerry.
Oh, right.
Okay, I was going to see
if you put a...
For Jerry. Okay. Think about what it takes. You talk about the weight of the star and all that. Here's somebody that's been here as a coach, been here as a player, and similar to Jason Garrett, as far as understanding what it takes to be the coach here. Mm-hmm. Understanding that sometimes your practice field has a an event going on. Right. You have to adapt. And we always laughed when Jason Garrett said something. You got to be ready to play at the home, away, parking lot of the moon. But he felt that way. And I don't know if McCarthy always did a great job of understanding that or so you have to understand what this is and being the coach here at the Cowboys. And I think Kellen, check that box off. Is he a young, bright offensive guy? Yes, you could do that. You could definitely say that. Does this hurt the team that you can't beat right now? Well, maybe. I mean, hand the ball off to Barkley, I think any offensive coordinator can be able to, And I say that, and also saying, well, then how great has Kellen Moore really been then?
Yeah.
If I think that way.
Didn't last in L.A.
Right. It didn't. He had a lot of weapons there. Didn't work, but it's working here. And Phil, I think he's done a much better job, and I think it kind of fits the mold. So he's the guy. I'm not saying that would be my choice, but I think that checks a lot of boxes that what Jerry's looking for.
It does, and that's my. When I say real quick, Tom, I'll throw it over to you.
No, you're good.
That's my concern with Kellen in Philadelphia is that you have an all-world running back who's back at peak form and he's fully healthy, and we knew what Saquon could be before he had the injury issues in New York. And you have him running behind an all-world offensive line, so it's not difficult to scheme up something to say just hand it off to Barkley and run behind those guys who are averaging 1+ yard or 1 yard more than any other offensive line in the league as far as before contact is made on their running back. And I was reading through, I can't remember who the account was on Twitter, but it was a fantastic breakdown of in the Eagles' win yesterday. Kellen Moore actually did not call a great game, and he has film clips supporting that as well. So, yeah, it makes sense in the aspect of everything Nick said, in addition to the fact that, boy, Jerry Jones does love his personal relationships. That's how Jason Garrett was able to ascend to his role. And I say that to say Jerry also doesn't like to feel as if something he put so much time into is not going to pay off for him. So I could see for that reason alone, Kellen Moore
He's already invested.
He's so invested in Kellen Moore at this point.
You guys make great points as to why Kellen Moore makes sense, and to the point
To
of
them.
to them, and to the point of to the point of great running backs with Kellen Moore. I mean, if you look at the hypothetical of Kellen Moore coming back to Dallas as the head coach, they've got the 12th overall pick, and there's a kid from Kellen Moore's alma mater who's pretty good at running back. So that's all just something to consider there too.
I said that.
If you
get Kellen, you probably get Ashton.
If you defer back to Jerry Jones's, like what you said, looking for a proven guy, a guy who's won a Super Bowl and who's done it before, then I think Pete Carroll is the name that makes the most sense.
Okay.
But I think there's. Is it safe to say that's your top two?
Nah, I don't know
No?
if that's top two. It's hard to really put a label
Right,
on
that's
it
true.
anyway.
As far as experience,
What-
guys,
Maybe
so-
the two
we're 12 hours into this thing.
Hey, would you drop number 12 for Sean McVay?
No, I would not.
Second round, 44.
no.
Second round, yeah.
Second round, yes.
But I don't
round,
think
yes.
I don't think
First round, no,
LA
because
would
I
do
don't
Okay.
know how they're going to approach free agents.
I hear you. You're like, if the Rams say, "No, we want a first round pick,"
I think that's what it would take.
and you're like, okay, well, your head coach wants out. He doesn't want necessarily to be here. Let's just say
Is
that's
that still the case
Let's
now
say,
that they're in the playoffs and they're
let's-
playing well?
I
And
think that was the case when they had the trophy in his hand.
it was true.
So
He was like, I might
So
retire.
it happens. I've seen it, Jimmy. So sometimes winning doesn't always cure all that.
Yeah.
But my point is okay, let's say that is the case. Your
Yeah.
coach wants to leave, and he's like, okay, first round pick. No, we're not doing that. You're like, oh, sorry, then, tough, deal with it.
No,
I
you
mean,
could
because
negotiate.
think about it. Do you want a head coach? Jerry said it the other day, and I agree. Do you really want your head coach with 1 foot out the door?
No.
He's going to
Exactly.
spend all the hours all the time. Yeah, they'll start with the first, but they'll negotiate. If your coach doesn't want to be here,
If they land on a second round pick at 44, as much I host the draft show. I love the NFL draft. I love having many darts at the dartboard, and you're already without a fourth round pick. That's a different conversation.
but you have a receiver. I'm just kidding.
If he can get a good pass.
Former second
If
round
he
pick.
can get a good pass.
Yeah, he'll be fine. If they land at 44, I would do that because you're getting a guy who's not only shown that he's established he can build with a crappy situation.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, too, is Sean McVay has won there in a similar, if not worse, situation from a salary cap and a roster and a lack of talent standpoint.
in the playoffs again.
And he's in the playoffs again, doing so, winning their division, though it be a down division. I don't care. He's a good head coach, and he's one of the leaders of this new wave of head coaches that you have not tapped into yet from a coaching staff standpoint.
And I'll throw this out too. The last, I think it was 40 Pro Bowls. The last 40 Pro Bowl selections that goes back the last 6 seasons, 33 of them are first or second round picks. So the thought that you can just get any running back to come in here, that's not always the case. most of the success we've seen lately, first and second round picks. There's a couple of exceptions. One of them is Kyron Williams, a 5th round pick, which is in that system. Now Tony Pollard's another, Mostert's another, some 3rd rounders are Kamara, but heavily first and second round. So it means if you're going to go, you want a stud, you got to get one relatively high, maybe even first round. But the offense that Sean McVay ran showed you that he had some success with. Now Gurley was in there, right? And he was a first round pick, of course, but I forget the backup's name that came in in the playoff game and just shredded the Cowboys. Was it Anderson?
Yeah, not Mario Anderson.
Mike Anderson? No, there was
number
38 or something like that.
Whatever.
Yeah, he played for Denver. I'll tell you that.
CJ Anderson. Yeah. He's the one that cried on the meme.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
I got a funny CJ Anderson story I could say off air.
Okay.
Off air.
My concern first I would say, just to be clear, I would in fact give up a 2nd round pick to acquire Sean McVay. But for me, it would then have to be a conversation with McVay before I pull the trigger on that pick. And that I know that you kind of talked about retirement here recently. I know that you need
a buy-in.
Yeah, I know that you have both eyes on TV money. How long, and TV money, ask Tony Romo, TV money is extensive. How long is your actual commitment going to be? Because I'm not giving up a 2nd round pick for me to have to find another head coach 12 months from now. Like that's not.
Or even 5 years.
I asked that question today, and the answer that I got, and again, I don't know if this is the most informed person, but he said Sean McVay is really smart. He knows how to play the game.
Well done.
So it was like.
That doesn't convince me.
Well, I know, but it could be like, is he really unhappy? Does he really want to go to TV? Or is he just saying, I could go to TV if his thing doesn't, like you're kind of throwing that stuff out there. So, again, we're going down that road. I'm not even sure that. I still think Kellen Moore is the one that makes the most sense. I think if To them? Well, yeah. Well, we're not making the decision, so yeah, it's got to be to them. It's always to them. I think the wild card here is Witten.
That's a good one.
But
wild card wise,
I think he'll be
position coach though. Position coach for Jason.
He's done a great job at Argyle Liberty Christian, but let me preface that it's Argyle Liberty Christian at the TAPS level of Division I high school football. I'm not going to,
and I hear you,
give him a head coaching job in the NFL.
I hear you, but after his 4th year in the league, he was a coach. He was a coach here in the NFL, and he coached these guys and these tight ends and the tight end.
Well, if that's the case, we might as well hire Zach Martin. I mean, once he's done.
All right.
My answer is yes.
I'm just saying.
All right.
But I tell you, we're talking about these guys and flipping it to, we talked about the assistants and how they're not on the contract anymore. And we talked about this, when you talk about bringing in Witten, and I said, okay, I would only bring in Witten as a position coach. Obviously, what's the most obvious position he would take over? It would be tight ends. I would not do that at the expense of Lunda Wells. Maybe you move Lunda Wells to a different situation, maybe offensive line coach.
He's coach or line.
Right.
Possible.
So Lunda Wells is a guy that I have to keep in the building. Guess who else I have to keep in the building? Al Harris.
Yeah.
I have to keep Al Harris in the building. Now, is that in the capacity of a defensive coordinator? Because I don't think.
Well, and what would the head coach coming in
exactly? There's so many pieces that have to be ironed out, and I'm just not looking forward to writing. Like I said, Tommy, I'm not looking forward to writing a piece on Al Harris, new Lions defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Like I'm not here for that.
Wade Phillips said something very interesting when he took over as head coach. He said, "You always keep 3 to 4 assistants from the staff you're in, even though you think it's a situation where blow it all up and start fresh." He's like, you always want to have a couple, maybe 3 or 4, because if you don't, then you make the same mistakes on these players that they made before. Yeah. You need to have a couple guys like, tell me about him. That's why Fossil makes sense. I mean, he's got 2 guys in the Pro Bowl, 2 guys I think that are alternates. I mean, he's had success. And Fossil's good with some of these guys because he knows most of these players. So that would be a good person to not only hold over, but then you're like, tell me about Damone Clark or whatever, and whatever that answer would be.
Deuce Vaughn,
exactly. So you do need some holdovers, and I think there would be. I think Lunda Wells is a must.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I look at Lunda Wells. I look at Al Harris, like you said, and Bones Fossil. Back to the Jason Witten point. The one thing that I question with that is he's coaching his son, Cooper, at Liberty Christian. So is that going to be something where he's of the opinion of, hey, I want to see my son through his high school career? Here's a 2027 prospect who's actually a 4-star, by the way.
Yeah, he's been really good.
He's been playing really well at linebacker.
Comes from
for
good
them.
stock.
Yeah, I guess so. So is that a question for if you look at Jason Witten? does he want to continue coaching his son?
30 miles.
Yeah, I was about to say he's not like it's
down the
cross country. Like
I understand. I understand he's not across the
But
country,
it's not the same
but
level of involvement.
being in the building with
You're
your
right.
son every
Yeah,
day, or
and
being in the
cultivating
building
your
with
son.
the Dallas Cowboys every day, I'm not saying that either one of those is a bad option, but it's just something to consider.
No, you're right.
I one last thing to consider. We're already over our time, but I do want to ask this question because I think it's one of the most important elements of whoever you hire as your head coach. Who is going to fit in best with Dak Prescott? Plain and simple. Your franchise quarterback. You've invested the bank. I mean, backed up the Brinks truck in order to keep him here for an extended amount of time. You are committed to Dak Prescott, at least for the foreseeable future, and he's coming off of a major injury. Who is going to coach him to another level? McCarthy, one thing you cannot fault him for is how much he did impact Dak Prescott.
Right.
That was a positive. He came in and elevated him to a whole new height to where he was second in MVP voting at the end of the 2023 season. He elevated Dak Prescott. Who's going to be the guy, the new candidate that can fit that mold best? Is it Sean McVay, who's had tremendous success with multiple quarterbacks? He had Jared Goff going to a Super Bowl. He had Matthew Stafford winning a Super Bowl. And if you talk about a guy who can't move out of the pocket very well and has had his own injury concerns in the past, Matthew Stafford would be high on that list. Still won a Super Bowl with him, even though he had a lot of help around that too. A guy named Aaron Donald on the defensive side was pretty good too.
Is he good?
He was really good. So all of that element, I get Sean McVay, but are there other names that would elevate
I
Dak?
mean, I hate to keep throwing it back out here, and
You think Kellen would?
well, he has done it. I mean, Dak had 37 touchdown passes the year that he was the offensive coordinator, and so I mean, McCarthy did come in here and take it to another level, but it's not like Kellen wasn't here that took him to another level as well. So I'm not here grandstanding for this. I mean, I just think it's a situation that makes sense for them, and so I see that.
What would the fan reaction be? That's the first thing I keep thinking. I mean,
I'm sorry.
Kellen coming back.
Yeah.
You know what it's going to be. You know
Well,
what it's going to be.
here's
I know
what I
what it's
hope. Well,
Riots in the streets, in the digital streets, because you guys, you're not actually going in the streets. But
Don't challenge him.
no, I mean we did.
let me ask you. I'm just going to say this
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick.
go for
it.
Who would you rather have? Who would you rather have? Graham Barton at center, or Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe at center?
Oh, that's quite a discussion.
Who would you rather? I mean, like Graham Barton looks pretty good. He did mess up the game for him the other night, but
Yeah, he kind of messed up.
but Cooper Beebe and Guyton,
Timing of this question.
it's a package deal.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's all I'm going to say.
Listen,
So,
I'll
okay,
say this.
but what are you alluding to there?
I'm saying that whoever is hired as coach, just remember there's a package deal to all this. There's all the decisions that they had to make here to keep things intact the way that they did. So it may not have been the same if McCarthy was here. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, just
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
we can all fix these issues and answer these questions if you just bring me Todd Monken. Okay, if you just bring me
guy.
Todd Monken, let's just do that.
I mean,
Who's that?
Let's just do that. You know.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, really? It's offensive coordinator for the Ravens.
Yeah.
Oh, I never heard.
well, he's only
OC.
saying that because he's a
No, I'm not
Georgia
only saying
Bulldog.
that.
Okay,
I'm not
that's what I
only
thought
saying
it
that
was.
because he's a two-time national champion. I'm also saying it because if you look at how the offense is being run, now granted, Lamar is Lamar.
Because you just said that Kellen with the Philly, anybody could just hand the ball to Barkley.
he's got two aliens
Agreed.
on the Baltimore offense.
That's fair. But the play calling is in Baltimore is far from
that's
as simplistic as it is in
Yeah,
Philly.
correct.
It's not as simple as just handing it off to Derek. They don't do to Derek as the Philadelphia Eagles and Kellen Moore do to Saquon Barkley.
Absolutely.
You know what I love about what the Rams have done too is that we said Kyron Williams 5th round pick. I mean, was Cooper Kupp a 3rd or 4th? I think he was a 3rd, maybe.
Cup?
Yeah.
Was a 4th or a 5th.
And Puka Nacua is
He's a 5th.
right. So I mean, he's got Pro Bowl players and some of them all pro players because he knows his system. He knows exactly the kind of guys that will fit his system, and that's so valuable when you're talking about
Cup was
draft.
a 3rd round.
Cup was a 3rd, and Nacua was 5th. Kyron Williams was 5th. And you just mentioned two quarterbacks that people basically, the Lions gave up on them, the Rams gave up on Goff, but I mean, he went to the Super Bowl.
But speaking of the Lions, we've said all these names and we've said Aaron Glenn, but we haven't said Ben Johnson.
We did say Ben.
Yeah, Ben was up there early.
Yeah,
that was
Ben
a part
has
of
to
the
top the list. The problem is, and we've talked about this on the podcasts before, the asking price.
Yeah, I think Ben will take.
Ben Johnson's going to price himself out.
Yeah, I think Ben would take $5 million, but then what happens after October?
Right.
So that's only a third of the year. Like this is the whole year. I think it would be way too much.
One name that was already tossed around among NFL circles was Bill Belichick. And I know he took the North Carolina job, and he looks happy in Chapel Hill, and that's where he wanted to be, and all that good stuff.
Close to Josh McDaniels. No,
he's done it before. He was hired one day with the New York Jets and then took the Patriots job after that press conference. He's done it before, and his buyout goes from $10 million to $1 million after June 1st, which you might have to wait until June 1st, which is also not an ideal scenario. But
I don't think you want to be without a head coach.
So it would be $10 million, but it's not like it's an unforgotten solution.
I don't.
He's there too.
You can't convince me that Jerry is going to pay $10
million
to get him out of
here?
that, and
then
give
pay
him
a
the
salary
salary,
on top of
which
that.
is going to
It'd
be
be significant.
top shelf money.
I think I'm there too.
I'm good on that.
Especially not when you have other options.
I just wanted to bring
we
it
talk
up.
about Sean
There are people
McVay.
that are going to throw that name out
Yeah,
there.
and fair, and I'm out on that. But when you talk about Sean McVay and giving up a premium asset for that, that's viable. That's a conversation. But then the opposite side of that conversation is when you have keeping to the experienced guys who have jewelry.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll, you can get Pete Carroll without giving up an asset like that. Or you can go buy out Bill Belichick and pay him his asking price, or you can get Pete Carroll for. So that's what I mean. That's going to be the thought process with this front office.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to do a prediction or no? Do we want to save that for our own conversations down the line?
You want to wait till the body gets cold?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let the body get cold.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But that's the whole breaking news side of it. Mike McCarthy out as head coach of Dallas. Dallas now looking to a new head coach, whether that be a young offensive coordinator unproven in the league or somebody with jewelry, as Patrick just outlined. So you can hear more on that throughout the week. Nick, when is your show?
We'll have storyline tomorrow. We'll have one show tomorrow afternoon, and then also Wednesday morning.
Okay, so
we just got one more weekly show that we're doing for TV, but then we'll Wednesday morning.
Wednesdays.
There's a show.
It's Wednesday at 9:30, right?
Wednesday 9:30 is the regular time.
There's a show tomorrow at 10 a.m. that
there is Talking Cowboys.
Pretty good stuff.
We will have that. No Tommy Yarish on tomorrow. Sorry, buddy, but you can catch him on the draft show at 11 a.m. So don't worry, he'll be right back with 10 and 11 a.m. tomorrow. So all three podcasts for us will be on the air tomorrow. All right, that does it for Patrick Walker, for Nick Eatman, for Tommy Yarish, Chris Beam in the back. I'm Kyle Yeoman saying so long. A breaking news podcast. I almost did it today on Draft Show. Breaking news podcast. Mike McCarthy out as the head coach in Dallas.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!